history matters and how it lives within us. Today, we are privileged to welcome Dr. Tommy Ender, an associate professor at Rhode Island College and coordinator of the History Social Studies Secondary Education Program. Dr. Ender brings history alive through innovative technique and research connecting to the past to the present. His work spans social studies, pedagogy, counter-narratives, and cultural perspectives on history, making learning both meaningful and engaging. Without further ado, we invite Dr. Vikas Malik sir to formally introduce Dr. Tommy Ender, who will now take over the session.
Thank you, Srishti. On behalf of Carnegie History Association of Department of History, it's my honor to welcome you all to our annual lecture for the academic session 2025-26. Today we gather here to engage with a theme that is both historically profound and urgently contemporary. Women and leadership, the unfinished revolution in American democracy. As we sit here in a premier institute, this topic resonates deeply. History is often thought as a series of finished events, but the struggle for representation and leadership is an ongoing process, an unfinished revolution. Understanding how this dynamic plays out in American democracy offers us to a powerful mirror to reflect on similar journeys of gender and power across the globe. So to guide us through this complex terrain, we are pleased to be joined virtually by a scholar of international repute. Please join me in extending heartfelt welcome to Dr. Tommy Ender, joining us live from Rhode Island College, USA. Dr. Ender serves as an associate professor of educational studies and history and is the program coordinator for history, social studies, secondary education. His work sits at the fascinating interaction of history and education, looking not just at what happened, but how we understand the narratives of the past. He has written extensively on bringing marginalized voices to the center of historical discourse. Some of his notable works include using counter-narratives to expand from margins and his insightful research on civics and Latin and art led us to the past with hopes to the future. His scholarship challenges us to rethink how we teach and understand civic engagement, making him the perfect voice to address today's theme. Dr. Ender, despite the significant time difference and the geographical distances, we are truly grateful to you for logging in to share your time and expertise with us today. We are all eager to hear your insights. So without further ado, may I now request Dr. Tommy Ender to please take over the virtual podium and deliver the annual lecture. Over to you, sir.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I hope all of you are doing very well today. Thank you for the generous remarks that were shared just now. Also, I want to thank Dr. Chayadika for this wonderful invitation. And I am glad to hear that the way history is viewed is both important and complex. And I aim to show how women and leadership go hand in hand in the United States, but also how the work needs to continue and is continuing. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Can someone just tell me if you can see the screen that says Women in Leadership, please?
Yeah.
Okay. How about now?
Beta,
My apologies. I am not accustomed to using Google Meet, so I am just want to make sure I can.
आप बोल दो हाँ दिख रहा है
Here we go. Oh.
Sir, earlier
Oh,
it was
it's good. I am sorry. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, I'm going to show my, oh my goodness.
please share your screen and after a while.
From here you can share this.
Okay.
Earlier, you shared right way. The first time you shared, that was the right way.
Okay.
So please share your screen and then open your PPT. Then it will be visible for us each moment.
Okay. Share the screen. How about now?
Yes. It's perfect now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so after some technical difficulty, thank you for your patience. Welcome to the annual lecture. And I like to start off every lecture with a list that describes the organization of the actual lecture. So I will introduce myself first, and then I'm going to go into the women and leadership portion. And then I'll have 3 takeaways that will sum up my lecture, and then we'll have time at the end to have a questions and answer section. So first, introduction, this is a picture of me in Spain during the week that I met Dr. Chayanika at the conference at the Universidad de Malaga. And I'm originally from New York City. I grew up there, New York City being such an incredible international city has really informed how I conduct my research and my teaching. I was a secondary teacher for 10 years, teaching social studies across different geographic areas of the United States. And then for the past 9 years, I have been in teacher education, teaching future educators how to go into classrooms and teach social studies. My role is associate professor, which I love very much. It brings me great joy and passion. In addition, I am happily married to my wonderful wife, and I have 2 children who are now entering university age. And so things are always exciting. And one last thing about me is I love football. I'm a big Arsenal fan. I'm also learning the art of cricket, and I find cricket really interesting, so hopefully I'll get to play it sometime this summer. But that is a little bit about me. So, women in leadership. And we're going to begin with the foundation's time period of the U.S. American Revolution. And what I'll do is I'll show the name, an image, and then some facts about that person, and we'll go throughout the different time periods in U.S. history. So we begin first with Phyllis Wheatley. And Phyllis Wheatley, what's notable about her is that she was an African-American poet and writer. And during this time period, African Americans were predominantly enslaved people, and they were not, they did not have access to education of any sort. And what Phyllis Wheatley did was she wrote poetry and wrote articles that brought international attention to U.S. slavery. And she became so popular that the provincial governor and other members of the political class formally interrogated her because they could not believe that a black woman who had been enslaved could have such sophisticated writing in the English language. Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams was married to John Adams, who was the second president of the United States. She advocated for women's rights in the northern geographic area of the United States. But what was interesting about Abigail and her role as an advocate was that she was one of the few women during this time period to actually own property on her own, meaning she ran the business of maintaining the properties on her own. And women during this time basically did not have any rights when it came to being a business owner or owning properties. The third person is Mercy Otis Warren. Now, Mercy Otis was a writer and a poet. Prior to the independence, she published many anti-royalist works that inspired the resistance against the British. And after achieving independence, she started to write pamphlets and other writings where she opposed the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. And she unfortunately had to use a different name in order for it to be widely published. But she was an outspoken writer and a leader. So these are just three individuals. There are other women who did incredible things, but I want to give you an overall view as we go through each particular time period. We progressed into the 1830s through the 1860s in all aspects of life: politics, family roles, education, jobs, religion, morals. One fact about the Seneca Falls Convention is that out of all of the women who signed the document, only one person, her name was Charlotte Woodard, actually lived till 1920 when she was able to vote. So when Charlotte attended the Seneca Falls Convention, she was 19 years old, she was a glove maker. You fast forward to 1920, by then she was 91 years old and voting in the presidential election. Sojourner Truth. She was a writer, and her most famous work, Ain't I a Woman, went directly against the feminism that existed in the United States at the time, the idea that white females could advance abolitionist views. And so she challenged it and made it a point of saying that if women and men who are advocating for women's rights must intersected with racial equality. And given the fact that slavery was still a political and socioeconomic issue during this time, she made it a point in her writings to advocate that. And for Sojourner, she was one of the first women, not only black women, but women to actually successfully sue a male in U.S. court. And what happened was her son was illegally transported to another state. She sued for his release and won based on her ability to argue and support her arguments. And then you have Harriet Tubman, another individual involved in the abolitionist movement, the fight to end slavery. She served as an Underground Railroad conductor where she helped 70 enslaved people leave slave states in the U.S. South up to the U.S. North where slavery was outlawed. And she consistently did these trips, and she ultimately served as both a spy and as a leader of a military operation to rescue additional enslaved people during the U.S. Civil War. So between the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848 and Harriet Tubman being involved in the Civil War, we have a lot of anti-slavery movement led by women. Now we come to the Civil War and the Reconstruction era. And Clara Barton was somebody who was an educator. She taught others how to read and write, but she also served as a nurse during the U.S. Civil War. And prior to being a nurse, she worked in a bureaucratic office, the United States Patent Office in 1855. And she earned the same wage structure as her male counterparts. And it was such an upheaval that a woman earned the same amount of money as the men that her superiors ended up demoting her to a lower paying position just because she had made the same amount of money as her male colleagues. She later, after the end of the Civil War, she founded the American Red Cross, which is a humanitarian organization that now extends globally, the International Red Cross, and we got other organizations based on her work. Another person, Anna Dickinson. What was incredible about Anna Dickinson was that she was a phenomenal speaker. She would be brought to different universities, different community areas, halls, and she would give passionate speeches about ending slavery and advocating for equality between men and women. And she, in fact, was the first woman to speak in the U.S. House of Representatives. Prior to that, no other woman had been in there either as an elected leader or as a guest. And then you have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and another writer, also advocated for the end of slavery as an abolitionist. And she is most famous for writing the Declaration of Sentiments, which was the founding document coming out of the Seneca Falls Convention. And with her, once she established the National Woman Suffrage Association, she then took her writing skills and wrote something called the Woman's Bible, where essentially she used writings in the Christian Bible to then speak as a radical feminist. And the people who were running the National Woman Suffrage Association during that time actually censored her for writing that book. So between Clara Barton and Hannah Dickinson and Elizabeth Kate Stanton, we're seeing this buildup of women leaders who are advocating for equality and for the rights of others. And as we progress through the 1870s to the 1920s, we continue this push for suffrage, women's suffrage, the right for women to have the opportunity to vote in political elections. And Carrie Chapman Catt was a leader who advocated and campaigned all over the United States for a constitutional amendment allowing women to vote. Now, this is something that I just learned a couple days ago about Carrie. When she was married for the second time, she actually had a contract with her husband that allowed her 4 months to work as a suffrage leader during the year. This was unheard of in any element of American society. And the fact that she negotiated that with her husband was unheard of. The legal arrangement did not exist. And so the concept of prenuptial agreements that you hear celebrities using today came out of the arrangement that Carrie and her husband had. Madam C.J. Walker. She was an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and an activist. She was the first self-made female millionaire in the U.S. She sold beauty products to other Black women in the United States. And this was also unheard of. Many times, products that were sold to Black and African Americans in the United States were made by white women or white men. Madam C.J. Walker saw that as an opportunity, and within 10 to 15 years, she had amassed a great fortune, and in turn, she was able to become more politically influential, particularly around the issue of lynching. Lynching, the violent act of hanging somebody by their neck off of a tree. And so she advocated for a law that would ban that. Alice Paul. Alice Paul was also a suffragist, also advocated the right for women to vote, and she authored the Equal Rights Amendment, which specifically said men and women shall have equal rights throughout the United States. Now, what she did, and what's really, I think for understanding the way constitutional amendments are added to the United States Constitution, it takes years, and it also takes many states, I believe right now, 37 out of the 50 U.S. states have to approve the amendments. And the fact that even to this year, 2026, it still has not been ratified. So we technically in the United States do not have a law that says men and women shall have equal rights. And so Alice Paul wanted to get something in writing in the U.S. Constitution, but today we still don't have that. Then as we progress through World War II and the Civil Rights era, Eleanor Roosevelt, she was the first lady married to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. She later became a diplomat, working with the United Nations, where she advocated for human rights, particularly for women in the United States and globally. And Eleanor Roosevelt is an innovator when it comes to journalism in the United States. She would host a weekly press conference, and she would only invite women journalists to the press conference. And what news organizations in the United States started to realize was that they needed to hire women to become journalists to represent them. And so from that point forward, today in the United States, it is common to see men and women working together as journalists. But Eleanor Roosevelt was the first person to do that action. Betty Friedan. Betty Friedan was a journalist and an activist. She is famous for writing a book called The Feminine Mystique and created an organization that is called the National Organization for Women. And what Betty Friedan did was she wanted a magazine that was devoted to the issues and solutions for women in the United States, but also run and edited and written by women. And so, with that type of work, today, now we see many magazines, we see programs on television and on social media that are specifically devoted to women, run by women. Betty Friedan was an innovator for that. And then for me, growing up in New York City, I heard a lot about this woman. Her name was Shirley Chisholm. Now, Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman to be elected to a congressional seat. She was the first African-American woman to run for president. And she wrote a book called On Blocked and On Bossed, which she said, what we see today in the United States, that she was not going to let millionaires and corporations influence how she was going to conduct her political business. And she was also a child of immigrants. Her parents came from the Caribbean. And so having the experience of growing up, what we call in the United States a first generation person, meaning they're the first generation to live in the United States, having that experience and growing up in New York City and then running for Congress and being elected for many terms as a congresswoman, she was a fierce advocate for the rights of women. In fact, when she was first elected, the person in charge of this committee put her on an agricultural committee. Now, New York City does not have any agriculture. It is industrial. But Shirley realized that that was a misstep or an error in judgment by the chair of the committee, and she fought to be added to a different committee, and she became a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. And she did that through advocating for her right to be heard and seen. And as we come to today's world, from the 1980s to the present, we see some commonalities when it comes to progress being made. So we begin with Sandra Day O'Connor. She was the first woman Supreme Court Justice. Now, up until this time, I have talked about women who are advocating for changes to laws, who were journalists, who were activists, but now we see women who are now actually involved in becoming lawyers, creating the laws in the United States. And Sandra Day O'Connor was chosen to be the first woman Supreme Court Justice. And that happened in 1982. When Sandra graduated from law school, the ranking system in the United States is very important when it comes to law school. So the higher you are in your class rank, the more opportunities you have to work at prestigious law firms. She graduated number 3 in her class. She did not get a single job opportunity. And what she later wrote in her writings was that she was getting job offers as a legal secretary, not as a lawyer. And so she had to advocate for herself. And ultimately, she became a judge and then became a Supreme Court Justice. Then you have Sonia Sotomayor, who today is the first Latina Supreme Court Justice. And what makes my heart really warm and happy is that Judge Sotomayor is from the same part of New York City that I'm from, which is Bronx. And so somebody who grew up in what we call public housing, where families do not have the financial means to buy a house, they're living in a government home or a government building. She grew up in one of those, then ultimately became a lawyer, and then was nominated by President Obama to become the first Latina Supreme Court Justice. And one thing that she always talks about as what has given her strength was her diagnosis of type 1 diabetes when she was a young girl, and how she had to learn how to give herself insulin injections as a child, and how that taught her resilience and to not give up, and while at the same time a sense of independence and a sense of becoming a better person. That all helped her become who she is today. And then we have Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. She is the youngest woman and the youngest Latina to ever serve in the United States Congress. She is also from New York City, and you may hear this New York City reference from many of these women leaders. And for me, that is not by accident. Just again, New York City is such a very diverse city, and in order to succeed in a place like New York City, one has to learn from different groups of people and become well suited and well adapted to different situations. And so Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is from Queens, which is another part of New York City. And after she graduated from university, she had to work as a bartender and as a server in restaurants and bars in order to support her family financially. Her father died, and the house that they lived in was on the verge of foreclosure, which is the process of a bank taking over ownership of the house away from the actual individuals. And she was doing that up until the year she was elected in 2018. And so we're seeing many women coming through different leadership positions in the United States, whether it's politics, journalism, education, and really advocating for equality. And so when we're looking at the three takeaways from the different profiles of women leaders in the United States, yes, progress has been made. Today, women have the opportunity not only to vote, but to own property, to run businesses, to educate, to be lawyers, to be autopilots. So many opportunities exist for women today. For me personally, my daughter is 19. She is in university at the moment, and she wants to go to law school after she is done with university. And she is well aware of the advances and the sacrifices of all the women before her in previous years, decades, and centuries. And so, yes, progress has been made. At the same time, there are still challenges involved. And I referenced the Equal Rights Amendment, which has now been going on for almost 80 years. The action of putting into law the equality of men and women so that men and women could be paid the same, could have the same rights. It's still ongoing. One issue that I know when I've spoken to my daughter and other women leaders in preparing for this lecture is not only the financial element, but also the social element, the respect element. The idea that just because I am a woman does not prevent me from succeeding or from engaging in actions that will make society better. And so, with that in mind, we still have a lot to cover. And as a male, as a man in the United States, what I've also discovered is that I will say to anybody who's a woman in a leadership position, tell me more about who you are. Tell me what inspired you. And I just listen. And I want to make sure I can support them any way they can. And so that's what I discovered to be the most appropriate approach. But again, there are other men who in the United States have to learn that and so forth. We have to continue working at making equality something that is just part of our fabric in our society. And then looking ahead, and I know this was mentioned in the opening remarks, I always like to leave a question for the audience members or for my students in my classes or when I'm presenting at conferences. And this is a very important question for one to consider. What will the next generation of women leaders do? Again, going back to the 1700s all the way up to 2026, we're talking about 250 years of different events that have led to, like I said here, progress being made, but there's still challenges. So another aspect of this takeaway is, what do the young women, particularly the young women in my classrooms, what can they do to invoke change and to bring equality fully into our American society? And with that, I want to thank you for listening to me and to sharing out information. Thank you. Let me stop sharing so that I can see everybody. There we go. And so this is a great opportunity now for questions. So if anybody would like to go first and ask a question, I'm ready.
So now the place is open for the question answer round. Anyone who wants to ask the question to the sir?
हाँ प्लीज हाँ प्लीज कम दें हाँ वहाँ पे यहाँ पे बेटा इधर आ जाना दिस साइड तो ही कैन सी हाँ मैम के पास आके हाँ सिट दे हाँ अब ठीक है.
So, as you mentioned, a lot of women, like 3 women per period. So, how did you actually choose all those 3? Because there might have been many women who have made the breakthrough in all those centuries or the periods that you mentioned. So, why and how did you choose those 3 women?
That is a great question. I chose the 3 different women for each of the time periods via 2 reasons. The first reason, I asked my daughter, which women from your studies have you learned the most about throughout the time period? And so she gave me a list of names. And then the other reason for that, second reason, I asked a couple of my colleagues who specialize in women and gender studies in the United States, and I showed them the list that my daughter created, and they both said, "That's a great list. I'm gonna give you a couple other names." And based on the reaction of my colleagues who specialize in women and gender studies, they then said, this is great that you asked your daughter because we always want to engage with the next generation. And so I took the names and put it on the slides. In fact, I had some additional names, but I did not want to do information overload by throwing a lot of information. I wanted to pick and profile the names that meant to both my daughter, my colleagues, and to me as well, because I've learned from these women as well.
Next.
Thank you for asking that question.
Good afternoon, sir. So, as you mentioned, Anna Dickinson and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they were the powerful lecturer, as you said. I was wondering how the public speaking was such important weapon for women in that time of life.
Thank you for asking that question. Public speaking, unfortunately in the United States, public speaking is not taught at any level of education, whether it's primary, secondary, tertiary. So it's learned either from listening to others or from videos like today, where we watch TikTok or Instagram or any other type of social media. But back then, from the research that I've done, many of the women leaders had a natural ability to just connect with large groups of people. And so they learned to refine their public speaking skills. Now, we don't have, for like the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, we don't have recorded speeches, but I wish we did, because then we can actually hear how they spoke and what they said and how people reacted. And then when we look at women leaders today and how they engage, we have that, but I wish we could go back in time. It's, uh-oh. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Public speaking is very important, and for women leaders, they have used it to advance solutions to the issue of inequality in the United States.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Dr. Anjali. I teach history here, and it's my pleasure to hear you speak because women and gender studies is something that I specialize in. It's of great interest to me. So, and we all know that America has emerged as the champion of women's rights and gender rights as compared to the most developing nations, as that of mine. But when I go to the 1980s, where you mentioned that Madame de Connor was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the 1982 she became. Shortly after, in 1989, India also had the first woman Chief Justice, which was M. Fatima Bibi. Now, what I want to know is that in the 1980s, when we were at the same pedestal in terms of providing the opportunity to women to the topmost leadership, how have things changed for America, that it has emerged, as a champion of women and gender rights and equality and inclusion, while developing nations such as ours have lagged behind? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I will say that question in the political world that we currently live in the United States, I've been very concerned about a retrenchment happening In fact, depending on where one lives in the United States, some of the state governments have now receded in terms of equality for all, particularly around transgender individuals or even access to medical care for women. And so I say that because I think of the time period of the 1980s into the 1990s, and the president of the United States at the time was Ronald Reagan. And according to our current president, Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan was a hero to us. The facts say otherwise, where Ronald Reagan selected Sandra Day O'Connor and had other women in leadership positions, whereas the policies of Donald Trump say otherwise. And it has, like you said, it has been the beacon for gender rights around the world. But I'm just very concerned for the past few years now where we're going as a nation. And I don't know how it's going to turn out, to be honest with you. Because there's going to be a period after Trump leaves where we're going to essentially have to clean up many messes, whether they're laws, policies, practices, and that's what worries me as both an academic and as a father to a daughter and a husband.
Thank you, Dr. Edna, very well put. But I just want to say that the fact that the previous generations in the government of the United States have made it possible for you and everybody else who wishes to, openly voice out their opinions and disagreements against the current government. Very often than not, that does not happen in countries where you cannot voice out your opinion against the authority and the leadership. And that is the very reason why I feel that America still continues to be a country that voices out against practices which erode and hamper inclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, Erika.
Hi, Tommy, it's Charita here. I'm sorry.
Oh, ma'am, she also wants to ask something.
Yeah.
Erika, वो भी पूछना चाह रही है कुछ.
Erika, you want to ask something? You raised your hand.
मैं उनको बोला.
You need to unmute yourself first.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Erica.
Hello, Tommy. So nice to see you here. You mentioned Malaga also, and thank you very much. So I have a I'm a Dr. Erika. I'm from Lithuania and political science, and my specific area is culture. So I think that many artists make a big also in around and question what kind of problem do women leaders in the United States run in States? What do you think on biggest?
So if I heard you correct, Erica, you asked what kind of problems do women leaders in the United States
Run in these days.
Okay. Great question. I can tell you from the, again, going back to the previous question about the advancement of women and gender rights in the United States, I think what we have seen in recent years of women running for the presidency of the United States and being defeated. And that's a whole other conversation that could last for hours, but I think the United States as a whole is not ready for a woman to become president. However, many states in the United States have women governors. Many cities have women mayors and women in leadership positions at the local government levels. But I think the major problem is that, unfortunately, there's still a large populace, particularly men, but also very conservative women, who do not view women as able-bodied to become president of the United States. Now, if we move the presidency out of the way, I think the other problem is something that is rooted in gender. One thing that I've discovered is that oftentimes how a woman in a leadership position reacts to an event, men will say, oh, you're getting too emotional. When in reality, if a man reacts the same exact way, they're being viewed as, well, you know, he's being a strong leader. And that imbalance is something that's still part of the social fabric, and it needs to change. And I see it changing now with the younger generation of students that I have, but I think we still have a much older population that holds on to those ideals. So again, the presidency, but then also social norms that still exist in the United States are the major problems that women in leadership positions run into.
Well, thank you for your answer. And so I'm not correct no numbers, but I know that in Congress there are about 28% of women. It's not very much. Yes, yes, so we're in progress in all the countries. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ender, for an enlightening session and for inspiring us to think critically about.
Can I do a question?
Yeah, sure. Come
Okay,
forward, please.
we have one more question.
Okay.
से देख के
Hello sir, my name is Swarna Kedia and I would like to ask a general question actually. So my question would be that are women in US supposed to practice masculinity in order to be accepted to be in power? And the next one would be how women practice the caregiving roles as well as earn for the household and yes sir, this would be my question.
Thank you for the two questions. It depends on a combination of three things. One, geography. So depending on the geographic location that a woman is in the United States, caregiving is either a major element of a daily life or is just. Second is religion. Depending on the religion, whether it's Christianity, conservative elements of Christianity, or elements of conservative Judaism, or conservative Islam, you'll see caregiving sort of have issues with women in leadership positions because they view caregiving as something more important. And then the third reason, and it connects with the second question in a way, is that we're seeing an age where older women have views of caregiving, but younger women are choosing not to reproduce, or in some instances not even get married. And so you have these social battles that go on, and then you have the religion and the geography on top of that. So and it goes back to the question I asked, what will the next generation of women leaders do? And I'm starting to see it where the women leaders who are in their 20s entering their age 30 years will not be married, will not have children, may not even be in a relationship, and they're not doing it because of the work, it's because they're choosing to not do it. So we'll see how that comes out. But great questions though. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to see you here. I have a question. In India, when I was writing about the women in politics, I divided women in 4 categories who are successfully in the politics. Like first category is that the women who has family background in politics. Like Indira Gandhi, like Sheila Dikshit, like Sonia Gandhi. So, but they came because of their family background or family history, but they proved themselves. Like for Indira Gandhi, we remember Indira Gandhi as a Indira Gandhi, not as a daughter of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. We remember Sheila Dikshit as a Sheila Dikshit, not because she is somebody's daughter-in-law. They proved themselves, but they came because of the family. The second category is the women who has male support beyond the family. Like Mayawati, if there is no Kashiram, we can't imagine the Mayawati. Okay. The third category is the women who came through the organizational support. Like in Congress, Ambika Soni and BJP, Sushma Swaraj, many others. Okay. And then the fourth category, who doesn't have any kind of family history, who doesn't have any male support beyond the family, and who doesn't have even the organizational support, who built herself in the politics, like Mamata Banerjee. She's the Chief Minister of Bengal right now. So, could you explain, could you find any kind of familiarity in the US with these categories the women came through in the politics? Any familiarity? Similarity, is there any kind of?
Yeah. You asked a really, really hard question to try and put it into a nice, simple way. I will say the family background, the family lineage, the name in the United States, some women leaders have used that to their advantage. That has been a common occurrence, I would say, in the past 50 years or so. The other elements you mentioned, I'm not quite sure. Just because a lot of times the focus is on what your name is and how much money or what class level was your family in, and it's always the focus on that. That's why somebody like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who came from very humble class structure, had to work 2 jobs to get through university and to support herself after graduating from uni. And all of a sudden now, she is becoming very successful as a politician, but she continues to refuse to say, to accept corporate sponsorship of any sort. So I definitely agree with the argument that yes, family background, family lineage carries, it carries a woman leader very far, but the other elements, I just don't know. I don't have a proper answer. Sorry.
I will not continue more question. I lots of questions if it's about the women. But I know it's a midnight in America and I don't want to interrupt your sleeping time more. So first of all, thank you so much for giving us and as you mentioned, we met, this is a reunion you can say, even Erika met in Spain and Erika basically requested me that she wanted to join the lecture. So I said, okay, why not? So thank you. And I know when we were in Spain, we had a discussion regarding the history of India and the different perspective of history. And it was really wonderful to carry that conversation here among my students. And thank you so much giving them opportunity to see the history from so giving them the opportunity to see the history from the different perspective. As I taught some of the students the gender history in the world. So those students may be familiar about the reality of the gender because otherwise we have some kind of prejudice that the West have everything and we don't have. But everybody has struggled about for that. So I always say what my mother experienced, I didn't. So what I experienced, I don't want to experience in my further generation, and this will continue when we till we know to achieve the real equality in the society. So thank you so much, Dr. Tommy Ender. And it was really nice to have you among us. And I would like to thank my principal, Professor Neelam Goyal, who permitted us to have this lecture. And I will thank my all colleagues who really helped to run this lecture, all of the event very smoothly. And last but not least, my students who enthusiastically participated. So thank you so much and hope to see you some other time, some other place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Erica.
With this, we conclude the annual lecture of Kalindi Association Shyama Prasad Mukherjee College for Women, University of Delhi. Thank you, Dr. Ender, for an enlightening session and for inspiring us to think critically about the leadership, democracy, and the role of women in shaping history. And also thank you, Dr. Erika, for joining us today.
On the behalf of our patron, Professor Neelam Goyal, our teacher in charge, Dr. Vijay Kumar, the association team and the office bearers, we thank you all for being a part of this journey where history meets meaningful dialogue. Stay curious, keep exploring, and let history continue to inspire you. Thank you, everyone.
And good night.
बंद कर